All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Disaster Strikes and Now What? My name is Zuli Marabona. I'm Senior Vice President with KW Property Management, and I am joined today by Alex Martin, my co-host and partner. Hi, everyone. So whether you're in a high-rise condo or an HOA, today's conversation is packed with lots of great information, real advice from two of the most experienced firms in our business. When it comes to disaster preparedness and recovery, you really can't ever be too prepared. Alex, we're just 2 weeks into hurricane season. Isn't it amazing?
I can't believe it.
We're experiencing an active season already. So I'm excited to get going today. One quick housekeeping item. Our answer Q&A chat is up. So as we go through our session, please, if you have any questions or any comments, please join us there, and we will be monitoring those questions throughout our session. We also have great questions that were sent to us in advance. And with that, Alex, are you ready?
I'm ready. So Alex Martin, partner over at KWPMC, and backed by popular demand, Mr. David Shop from Sharp Project Development. Welcome back, David. A lot of people were asking for you. And then the one and only, the man, Matt from Global Pro. Good to have both of
you. Thank you, Alex. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start here, David. Storm hits, right? We were prepared. Everything went well. Storm hits. Now what? Take us into the first, 24 to 48 hours post-storm. What does it look like on the grounds?
Sure. Absolutely. Look, it's all about safety. I mean, the first thing that everybody needs to be aware of is that you've got to secure your building and make sure you're safe. Make sure your emergency services are intact, that you've obviously contacted your loved ones and your property manager to make sure that they understand what's happened. If they've had to vacate the site in anticipation of a storm, sometimes folks are there. They may be evacuated depending on where they are in proximity to the shore and the storm. But really, assessing the initial damage is key, and understanding, taking photos, videos, reports, going back to what photos you had done prior to the storm, which is key. And, Matt will talk more about that as we get into, his bailiwick. But you're notifying key parties, again, your insurance carriers, your underwriters, and the folks that are going to help you through that process. So, I mean, that's key. And then, you've got, that's like your first 72 hours, your first 24 to 72. We can talk about more as we kind of get into this conversation, but the most important thing to do is assess, not react so quickly. Let's make sure we know what's happening. There's good chance that in today's world, you're likely doing some renovations as it is. Whether it's structural facade or interior to the building, you likely have a contractor on board that should have had protocols in place. We call hurricane preparedness, and should be in every one of your contracts, folks out there. If you got work going on in or outside the building, your contractor should have an exhibit in their contract that explains in the event of a storm what they'll do. Unfortunately, it's going to become your financial responsibility because it's what's called a force majeure. If something happens and they have to take the swing stages off the building or take down scaffolding or demobilize, that's just part of the process. And those folks on the West Coast are probably more prone to it, at least in the last couple of years. It may flip. Who knows what happens in this world, but you're going to be faced with that. And it's something you need to be cognizant of. And so I'll kind of stop there, and maybe Matt wants to throw some things in there and talk about what he's seen and needs to be prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. You made a lot of great points there. So, I can piggyback off of much of that. I think one of the things is that moment after a storm is basically triage. You're trying to figure out what happened, what's damaged, how, the extent of the loss. You're trying to make sure that if any of the unit owners or tenants didn't evacuate for whatever reason, where are they? Are they okay? Is everything, is everyone safe? What's going on, obviously at the building, if there's floodgates and things like that need to be removed and taken away so water can also recede and go out as well. Those are the things that you're working on at that moment. Zuli knows after Hurricane Ian, we were on a very large property, and we were helping just clean up. When I went to a property here right after Hurricane Helene, I was helping them clean up. We were trying to move sand around. I mean, this was a big flood event in that area. There was sand everywhere. And when I went back a couple weeks later, all the sand came back. So we again started to triage. Where can we move the sand? Where can we make sure people can get in and out of the buildings, in and out of the clubhouse, in and out of the areas, so that they can start to assess the immediate loss and damage and understand what's going on. A lot of the times, though, you're not going to, to your point about being, you can be prompt, but you need to slow down, right? And at the end of the day, you're not going to know the extent of the damage. It's going to take days, weeks, sometimes months. You might have to get some experts, some fenestration
What happened on
experts,
Sanibel?
an
You couldn't
engineer.
even get back on the island for a week, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, look,
there's
we were
situations like
we
that.
were going to units or homes and associations that called us right after Hurricane Milton, Hurricane Ian, where we had to take a boat. We had to take a boat out to Captiva, had to take a boat out to Sanibel Island, and jump off the boat. And the joke that the fun side of this is, I fell off the boat one time trying to get out, trying to get out of the boat. I fell in the water. So, but with that being said, think about that. We were on
Covered,
the
by the
island.
way?
What's that?
Was that covered?
I don't know. We got to talk about. We'll talk about the workers' comp
Offline.
policy
I
over
would
here.
love to see that
Offline.
video. I'll never let you down on that one.
No, they showed me the video. We have video because Dan had the drone up, of course, and so he got the
Okay.
whole thing. So
All right.
I've seen the
Yeah,
video
let's
plenty of
talk
times.
later.
Don't worry.
Good deal.
So, but
But no,
that instance, right? There's nobody there. It's an island. There's nobody there. We couldn't even get on it because the road was damaged, the entire roadway. And so these are things that they take time. You have to work through it, right? And as
so,
property managers, you guys are integral, right? They expect you guys to be there, even though maybe your homes are destroyed too. Maybe you have some issues going on in the background, obviously with that catastrophic event. So a lot of things going on, but really triage, trying to figure out what, make sure everyone's safe, make sure that the property can be operable, open ingress and egress, open the floodgates, get in and out. I've walked into garages, multiple floors, where there's cars that are just spun around on top of each other all over the place. You guys have seen some of those things as well. So there's lots going on.
So, there's a couple of things that folks probably need to think about. And the biggest problem you find is communication. It's trying to stay in touch with not just your property manager, but your other residents, if you're board members, your other board members, and emails could be down, servers could be down. So you have to figure out a best way to, emails, text, postings. Maybe there's an app with your building that can be live somewhere on the web that people can kind of go to. So it's incumbent upon the board to kind of keep people informed, because that's usually the biggest problem is people really don't know what's going on, what to expect next, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I find is really important, we did this with the Archdiocese here in Miami. They have literally thousands of properties. It's a little bit different because they have this big archdiocese of properties, but conceptually with the condo buildings as well, you likely want to get yourself aligned with the restoration, not contractor, but water mitigation type of contractor, first responders, let's call it, that are there for you, so you're not chasing your tail when everybody else is calling on the same people. And there may be a premium for that, but if you can get on the preferred list, it might be something to think about, to know that they're there for you when something happens. Because when a big storm hits, and it's more the storm surge that really is a big problem. Everybody's got moisture, it's wicking up the walls, and everybody needs to get water out of their buildings. And there's a handful of folks that can do that, and they're going to mob to the state, but there's going to be a lot of demand. So you kind of have to think ahead and say, how do I get these folks on my team, right? And that's where KW can help you too. Obviously, they're your property manager, and they've got big relationships with a lot of national firms. So.
Yeah,
Alex?
KW especially has great partners, you guys know. And the important thing there, it's a great point you're making. The important thing there is that those partners right after the storm, whether it's WRG or Global Pro or whomever, right? Documentation is key. So that's one of the most important parts of getting through that initial phase there.
Matt, talk about, because Jose has a great question here.
Yeah.
It's like when it comes to the situation of taking video, pictures, what is it you like to see when they come to you with these videos, pictures, the pre and the post videos and pictures they provide to you?
Yeah, I was actually at a panel a couple days ago. We talked about this exactly. One of the things I think that most associations and boards maybe don't realize is that it doesn't take a lot of time and it doesn't take a lot of money typically to drone the envelope of your building, especially if you have a high rise. Some folks that I know, some associations that I know, actually have someone that on their security team or part of their maintenance team or whomever that are actually drone pilots, and they do it for them every month or every quarter or whatever. And those are always the best. The more pictures of the envelope we can get, the better, right? Before storm, pre-storm. once the damage has occurred, we're going to come get it too. WRG is going to get it. We're going to get it. We're going to make sure that the whole thing is documented and it's there. But the pre-storm preparation is key, because oftentimes what you get right away from the insurers that are now fielding all these claims, very huge claims if they're for associations, you're going to get a typical response, a reservation rights letter. You're going to get a response that says, oh, wear and tear, the buildings are old, and they'll give you all the reasons why they're going to try and deny or minimize the claim, right? But when you have all that evidence, it's kind of hard to refute. They have to take it back, right? So that's one of the most important things. The other thing is on the interiors, I get a lot of crazy pictures. I've seen a lot of different angles. It really doesn't, it doesn't matter the angle or anything like that. What you really need is a comprehensive view of that room, for instance, right? So you can square off any room. You can go to every corner of the room, or if it's not exactly square, you can try and take spots and just take pictures into the center of that area. One from each corner, one from every angle that you can get to. And that'll give you an comprehensive view of every part of that room. Again, we're the folks that you're going to call to come help are going to come document everything anyway, but that always helps. The other thing is I talk about videos. Videos are great. The issue with videos is a lot of folks take video and they like to talk. They like to tell everything they see, and they talk about everything they see. The issue is most of the time, it doesn't help the situation, because the video will speak for itself and it may hurt the situation. So I always say, if you're taking video, just don't say anything. Don't tell me that you think the water is 3 feet when it's actually 4.5, because that makes a big difference at the end of the day. And the fact that you said that on video is going to come up later, trust me, right? And you don't have to make those decisions anyway, or those calls, right? And the easiest thing is take video, let the video speak for itself. It's going to be pretty dramatic and pretty clear at the end of the day. So.
And this.
Well, I think, if I may, Dave and
Mhm.
Matt, I think it would be great if we take a step back too, because we have a lot of great questions. And with the expertise you both have in the industry, and the fact that a lot of our associations, let's face it, we're in Florida, and we've been faced with not one, but several hurricanes, depending on the coast you're in. And a lot of our associations are probably in the thick of some insurance proceeds or waiting on claims, projects, right? So I think we should take some time to maybe highlight your areas of expertise and what you do, because you have so much experience in each and every area. And then we can dive into more questions so that our viewers can understand why you're saying what you're saying and
Sure.
where you're coming from.
Good
So
point. Got it. Goes
Matt
right
or
in.
Dave, whomever would like to go first.
So I'll go. I just wanted to say something as just a follow-up final point on what you mentioned, Matt, about the photos, and not to insult anybody, but don't land those on your hard drive. Either send them up to the cloud or take a flash drive with you, because they may not be there when you get back to your building, right? And we've seen that before. But simple, it's just a simple thing, but cloud is the best because it's always going to be there, right?
Yeah, by the way, great point.
Good
Anything
point.
we do as far as documentation, it's either phone, it's drone, or it's cameras, but everything has an SD card, right? Everything has the connect to the cloud or whatever. So don't just rely on that one piece of equipment to get it there. But I'll start off, because I think this creates a great segue into how we can work together here. In the beginning, again, it's triage. You have to figure out what's going on. There's a lot of loss and damage that needs to be understood and then be described properly to the insurance company and documented, right? And you have to get through the claims adjustment process. That takes a while. We've done analysis on tens of thousands of claims. Global Pro's been around. This is our 13th year. And we have a database. I mean, we have servers and servers and servers worth of data from all types of claims, right? And the typical time for recovery for any claim, tens of thousands I'm talking about, right, is 6 to 8 months, right? And I say that, if you heard me, it's a broken record, because it's been true for decades. And what you have in that 6 to 8 months doesn't mean you're not going to get paid something. But to get to a full settlement, get past the coverage determination, start to get payments and checks, it's typically 6 to 8 months. So, our goal is to try to get that process done, to expedite that, to get it done as fast as possible. But typically, just so everyone understands, it's 6 to 8 months. I say that in every meeting. I say that every time someone asks me that. The data is always holds, it's always consistent, and we can go back again decades over tens of thousands of claims. With that being said, towards the end of that 6 to 8 months, typically we start having conversations about how are we going to repair all this? How are we going to do the drywall? How are we going to do the carpets in the common area hallways, right? How are we going to do the roof? Whatever the case may be. And this is again, I think where the synergy is here for David and I, because at that point, I would, you need someone to manage that. I would caution most associations don't have the understanding, don't have the experience of running projects that big, especially after a catastrophic storm. The easiest thing to do is to try to push it onto the property manager, and some percentage of that comes back on us, and we have tons of calls and tons of emails and this whole thing. That takes time away from everybody doing everything else, right? And so I think that the best case there is to find someone like David and his team to come in and manage that process. Not only that, because it's practical, not only that, but as a fiduciary, right? You're fulfilling your fiduciary duty, because your role as a board member is to protect the financial health of the association, right? That's what fiduciary means, right? And so let the claims folks, Global Pro, work on the claim and get through that. Let me communicate with a team like David's, so I can say, hey guys, hopefully we're getting a check in this amount. This is for the hallways. This is for the roofs. This is for whatever, right? And we can go back and forth and communicate and take away a lot of that liability from the board and from the property manager, who, again, I feel bad because they're getting everything. The property manager's getting emails and calls and text messages all day. And really, you should find someone like David's team who can manage all that for the association, and it gives you an arm's length, and it takes away that potential liability as a board member, and you fulfill your fiduciary role. I think that's very, very important. David can jump in here now and talk about what that
Yeah,
would
no,
look like and how they would manage that, because that's the second part here, and that's very, very, very important.
No, it's a good
Thank you.
segue, and I appreciate it, Matt. And like Matt said, we work in tandem because that 6 to 8 month period is a time when you're working through the adjustments in the claim process, and it takes quite a bit of energy to get a project off the ground. So, and everybody's concerned about now. I want to get back in the building. I need things moving quickly. And the worst thing we can do is hire someone to go in there and start making repairs ahead of time, right, Matt? We've talked about that before. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. Get a drywall guy here, a painter here, a waterproofer there. We need to really sit back and stop a second and assess what's ahead of us, prioritize what's the most important, talk about what projects we currently had underway. We might have open permits that we have to deal with. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen on the overall project, because you're talking about now contractors on contractors. So a lot of the jurisdictions are amenable to going outside the normal box of approvals. But the other piece of the puzzle is inspectors are busy. I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in the course of, when I say inspectors, like building inspectors, like it's very difficult to get people mobilized. But what will happen is, as soon as these storms hit, everybody comes to the state, right? They think, okay, there's work. The roofers, the drywallers, the cleanup guys, they all come and they're going to knock on your door and they're going to want that your business. And you just don't want to go there. You got to give us a chance, get a professional on board like us and Matt, and let's figure out a way to do this pragmatically with a fiduciary to you and your constituents. And then this thing's going to flow properly. You're not going to save any more time. You're actually going to unwind it if you go the opposite route, because we've seen it time and time again. Not to put aside the first responder guys. You got to get the water out of the building. You got to go get, you got to get the scrubbers in there, and you're going to have to do that. That's going to get covered no matter what. Now it comes to, how do we plan the improvement process, and where were we? And what about the reserves that we have for the upcoming year? It might be such that we have planned to modernize the elevators, not just kind of, do, ADA modernization. We have maybe determined that we're going to do the cabs. Well, maybe want to integrate those projects together because we have funding coming back to fix the elevators. So these things take a lot of thought process, how it impacts a special assessment, potentially, how it impacts the monies you have in reserves. And that's part of what project management is. It's helping you, sustain, all right, what do we have in our budget? What is our schedule? What's dictating what's first, second, and third? So I'm gonna step back a minute and go back to Zuli saying, who are you and why are you here, right? Okay, so my name is David Shaw. I'm a principal at Sharp Project Developments. We have been around since 1990. I'm a civil engineer and a general contractor, and have a team of 20 people. We're based in Fort Lauderdale. We have an office in Bonita Springs. We have an office in Doral. And actually in Ocean Reef as well. And so we've got a lot happening with the big South Florida guys. We're project managers, been owners reps since that time. We all come from construction and architectural backgrounds. And, our start was not nearly in, post-storm remediation. And it really isn't the forte that we do on a daily basis because storms come and go. I mean, we're doing concrete restoration work and interior lobby on condominiums, whether it's amenitized, which is towers, or non-amenitized, which might be your communities, your homes, and your clubhouses. So it varies. So we're doing many of those projects here in South Florida. And this is just, part of our platform that we help KW and others around the state when these situations happen. And being professional project managers, we understand the process and what kind of needs to happen. And so we've been doing this for quite some time, from programming all the way through to completion and every step in between. And we know all the games that people play. And we leverage relationships. And that's what I think a big thing is we bring to the table, and Matt on his side, is that we leverage relationship with contractors, vendors, design professionals that we know that will answer us when we call, because you're just one building in a group of buildings, and you may or may not get the responses that you're looking for because you don't have the relationships. For us, we've built them over the years. We'll continue to build those. So when we call on an engineer that we need to go in there and assess your pool deck right away because it was damaged, he's going to get there and give us his assessment. From that, we'll work, like I said, towards next steps. What is the highest of priorities? If we've got a parking deck that's damaged considerably and potentially not collapse, but it's at a point where we need to fix it immediately, that becomes the priority. So we'll talk about that with the boards and figure out the best decisions as to how to go forward. So I mean, that's a little bit kind of about us. And I guess just I could say, don't rush. As much as everybody is really crazed at the end of a storm and say, what do I do now? Yes, clean up the debris, get your building dry, take a step back. Let's see what we have to deal with. Let us work with Matt while we're in for this, trying to get the claim adjusted. We'll figure out next steps, right? And we'll put together a Gantt chart, schedule multiple budgets, and figure out how to navigate through what we want to do first, second, or third. The lobby flooring may not be the priority right now. We may have to go out there and, fix something out front, like the porte cochere that's, and everybody knows that, not to insult anybody, but those are the things that you all, if these are board members that are on the call, that need to understand, so you can be that conduit back to the membership so they know, unit owners and homeowners, that what's happening next.
One of the things that I definitely want to highlight, and thank you, Dave and Matt, for that, and Alex, I'll turn it over to you after this, is David, you emphasize this as well, is partnering with the right vendors, and especially post-storm, it's hard to predict because you do have a flood of different vendors that come in, and not all of them, I hate to say this, may be reputable or licensed or insured. And sometimes they don't understand the laws and the regulations in Florida. And I know, Matt, you can speak to this as well, as that may impact from an insurance perspective, right, when you submit for that. So, and we have seen associations that have been affected by this time and time again. So that, from a pre-storm preparedness, making sure that you are partnering with the right contractors, whether it's landscaping, whether it's a project management firm, or whether it's from your restoration company and beyond, it's very important that you do not assume that they will be available after a storm, because if there is a catastrophe, it could be very difficult after. And Matt, you can speak to what you have seen happen.
Yeah, unfortunately, and David said it earlier, after a storm, right, everybody's coming. And they're coming from all sorts of places in the country, in the Caribbean, it's down here. They're coming from everywhere. We also see that on the adjuster side from the insurance companies. You got to be careful, right? So if you're hiring somebody and you haven't vetted them, right, as a board member, you got to be very, very careful, contract wise, what the language is, what rights you're giving up, all sorts of things you have to think about. If you do this stuff pre-storm, you prepare for a potential catastrophe, and you have the right vendors, you have your team, then you should be ready to go, right? And so I think that's part of the upfront planning that's absolutely necessary. Get the right folks together. Maybe you're not contracting with them or retaining them formally at that moment, but if something happens, just make sure that they're going to be there. KW as just their ecosystem in general, right? If KW calls us, we're going to come no matter what, right? But there's lots of clients that we have that have been clients for decades. You know, if they call us, we're also going to come. So we have to figure that out on our side. But you know, at some point, we're gonna be, you know, outmanned, right, by everybody else. And so again, pre-storm, if you can get your team together, get the right folks together, have an agreement or an understanding that, hey, we're going to give you a call. Please put us on the top 25 list or top 50. We have preferred client agreements that we do that for our clients. You know, and I'm sure, you know, the WRGs of the world. David, I don't know if you guys do contracts like that. Maybe you do, and I'm not sure. But those are important. And again, if you can get your ducks in a row pre-storm, much better. After the storm, you have to be very, very careful. You can't let anybody walk on the property. You know, Zuli, for instance, we have a big claim that you know of where in the storm in Irma, in the storm prior to Ian, someone came on the property and they made a whole bunch of representations to the board and the association, and it didn't go so well for them after that because
Right.
much of it wasn't accurate. I'll leave it at that, right? But because of that situation, you have to be very leery, right? And I think, you know, unfortunately, and I'm gonna put my personal. This is my opinion. I'm gonna give you an opinion now. You know, after the storm, we heard a lot from the legislature, the CFO, and it was about, you know, checking licenses. Don't sign a contract until you know who you're working with, who they are, where they come from. I can tell you from a claim perspective, we show up to property sometimes, and the adjusters literally they got their license as an emergency license a day before. They came from Oklahoma, they came from Arkansas, they came from Louisiana. They don't know the laws here. They don't know the Florida statutes that guide our licensing and what you have to do, what your obligations are after a catastrophic loss by itself, a loss in general, right? Because they got their license the day before. They don't have to do anything. It's just an emergency license. It takes us almost a year to get licensed here as a public adjuster in the state of Florida. And so, you know, these are things that at the moment, everybody's worried about, you know, fixing everything, getting to back to their units, getting back to their property. I totally get it. But one little oversight could cost you a lot.
Agreed.
Again, I think that's why
And
to
that
reiterate,
comes-
you need representation. It's always best to have representation, whether it's us or an owner's rep project management team like David's. It's always best to have the right folks in place. And again, think about the other side, from a negligence or liability standpoint, you fulfilled your duty of care as well as a board member, fulfilled your fiduciary duty. So these are all things to think about at the moment, especially when it's hard.
To help you navigate, of course.
Well,
Alex, I
and
know
it's
we have a
hard
lot of
enough-
great questions
Yeah,
coming in.
Good. Good.
Just as a segue to that, it's hard enough in the world, the non-hurricane world, to find capable contractors that are not overwhelmed in this industry, that have the right insurances, the right bond. And so when chaos hits, it becomes much more difficult. And I would just caution everyone, if you intend to do this on your own, which happens quite often, there's not enough manpower to go around and manage all these projects, but make sure that you do your due diligence on who you're hiring. Like Matt said, from whether it's, you know, the Florida license, proper insurances across, about workman's comp, without question. And what'll happen with a lot of these companies is they're going to take on your job, and then they're going to 1099 a bunch of guys to do that work. And those folks don't have insurance. And that's where it really makes sense to hire a reputable company. And you'll pay a little bit more, but you're going to pay less in the long run. Trust me. We've been down that road before, right, Matt?
Yep,
David,
absolutely.
David, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was the next thing I was going to say. So don't try to go the cheap way. You're going to pay a lot more, right? What's that saying?
You get what you pay for. You get what you pay for.
Yeah, you're stepping over $1 to save a penny. So,
Mhm.
you know, there's a
But
couple
there's
best
just an enormous pressure from residents, and I get there's board members, and I know there's enormous pressure. We voted you, you do it, you got, and stop. I mean, it's a matter of, like, sometimes you gotta, you know, put good feelings aside. Say, no, this is not the way it's going to go down, and it's really drawing the line sometimes because there's too much at risk. And like Matt said, in today's world, the state's brought down new legislature where there's liability, and so, you know, it's really critical that the correct decisions are made. So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, Matt, and you guys shared some really great practices that I want people to remember. This is when you're walking the property pre-storm and you're taking that 4K 8K video, don't speak. Just take the video. Don't say a single word, right? Because you're not a professional. You're just you're just documenting. And
Alex, it's hard for some of us. We can't shut up, unfortunately.
I know. I do the same thing when I'm walking around. I'm the same way. I'm trying to narrate and trying to control the narrative.
Exactly.
And then he also talked about the drone. The drone is one thing we've implemented as a best practice. Those
Great.
drone shots on HOAs, buildings, cooling towers, the side where,
Very
if also,
powerful.
yeah, they are so powerful, and you can use those drone shots. And I know that Matt's team over Global Pro could use it heavily, and David's team also could see what it was prior, and before, and all
Sure.
this. But another thing, David, that you mentioned, which you're very right, communication goes down after a hurricane, and that is the most frustrating thing. I've been here my whole life, and I understand from Andrew. You don't have communications. Cell phone towers are down. Radios are really not working. Nothing's working. It's really hard to communicate. So one of the best practices that we're implementing here, and I highly recommend anybody that's a board member, a manager out there, is get a Starlink. Starlink never goes down during a storm. As long as you prepped and you have generator and you have power, you can connect to Starlink, activate your Starlink account at that moment, connect to it, open the router. Everybody can connect, call by Wi-Fi, send emails, WhatsApp chats. I mean, you can get things going to communicate with whoever you need to that's out of the storm area, right? And that works very, very well.
So Alex, for everyone that may not know what that is that just a service then? I can run that through my iPhone?
Some of the newer phones, LTE, I hear Verizon, and some of the newer, if I'm not mistaken now, that were manufactured from 2025 on, or now can connect directly to Starlink, to the satellite directly. If not, what you do is you buy an antenna. There's a small antenna and a modem that you plug in. You'll plug it in wherever you have power from your generator. And it's like opening up a Wi-Fi router, and you can connect to it directly, and it's going straight to the satellite. So you don't have to connect because cell phone towers are down. You could do call by Wi-Fi. You could do WhatsApp chat. You could start making a phone.
So the other person doesn't, we
Uh-oh.
lost.
Alex froze. So by the way, South Florida is the Tesla capital of the world. I think we still have the ranking #1 in the world for Tesla. So adding Starlink is probably going to be easy for most folks, and it is that
Phone
simple.
calls,
There is a little satellite that you get if you need it, and you can put it on your roof. You can bring it around wherever you want. You can take it wherever you want, and as long as it connects, you have Wi-Fi anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter.
Assuming
I was
the
going to
power's
recommend a
not down
Starlink,
in-
a Starlink for Alex now, since he had frozen, but I see
I
that
went
he's
down.
back.
Hey, hold on.
All
Let me
right,
go
Your
plug in
Starlink.
Starlink.
You're not on Starlink now, so that wasn't a commercial for Starlink when you went
All right.
down.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
But to that end, KW also has partners. A lot of these properties, whether it's Hotwire or Blue Stream or whomever, right? That have very specific programs for, post loss or post catastrophic events.
Mhm.
When it comes to getting generators, things like that. I mean, there's lots of things you guys can help with at the association level that can be prepared, pre-storm, right? And all that stuff can be delivered. So.
Right, and I think going back to communication in general, understanding the communication protocol. So obviously, to Alex's point, I think it's an excellent point, is to having the ability to connect, but also in the event that you don't have that capability, is understanding how you're going to communicate amongst the board and also with your residents, right? And having that plan in place in advance with your on-site team, with your management company. And as a board, whether you're a new board member or you're an established board, you should be connecting with your management team and your association attorney to fully understand your emergency powers. Trying to figure that out after an emergency, like a hurricane takes place, chances are you're not going to have time for a fully noticed meeting and a full board of directors meetings. Those types of processes don't exist. During that time, you should still document the decisions you're making, and they can be ratified later, but understanding your emergency powers. And if you don't know what that is, you should be connecting again with your association council so that they can guide you. And that should be part of your hurricane preparedness plan, so your residents understand that you will be exercising those powers post-storm.
I was on a panel, just as a side note, I was on a panel the other day. We were talking about hurricane preparedness, of course, and one of the questions came up, and someone said, it was a property manager, and they said, look, I have a unit owner, he puts his bike on the terrace and he locks it up on his balcony. And, I'm always worried that if we have a storm, that thing's gonna get loose and it's gonna fly or whatever. And I'm worried, he might sue me if I don't go remove it. And so they asked the attorney that was on the panel there about that. And then it came up that the bike was like it was like a $15,000, $20,000 bike. I said, if you have a $20,000 bike and you leave it on your balcony and the storm's coming, that's kind of your fault. I mean, at the end of the day, but you're right. To your point, the attorney said, we have to get notifications out, you have to communicate, and you have to do things properly so that, again, you relieve yourself of those liabilities, right? So,
Right.
So, something
Absolutely.
else to talk about there, and folks don't think about this, but there's a good chance that there's work going on next door to your property or around it or across the street, right?
Great point, yeah.
So that drone video you took, you might want to turn it around and take some pictures of the folks away from you so that if they decided not to follow protocol, because KW is not their property manager and they weren't doing the right thing, then, you know, you're going to be able to have a suit potentially against them. And this happened to us in Miami on a project. There was some damage to it. It wasn't our fault, but, you know, it's those things that we documented accordingly. And it wasn't an issue for our owner, for our building. But that's real important because there's work in this state right now.
Everywhere.
There's work going on everywhere. And it might be a swing, it could be scaffolding, it could be somebody's bike tied to the outside of the building, but you know, it really could be anything. And it's crazy that you got to think completely out of the box with these things when they happen. But in protecting your interests, it's just like having a home. You got to know that the person next door brought their patio furniture in so it doesn't become a missile, right? And it would be the same thing on your balcony. So it's incumbent upon the board to tell everybody, bring everything in off your patios when the storm comes. And there's these rules. And I thought there was a question somebody asked about, you know, what are the rules? And there are a lot of good things, information that likely get distributed to this group that afterwards that talk about in the event of a storm. These are from a maintenance perspective, these are, you should be trimming your trees around the community. You know, that happens, whether it's a community that has, you know, non-amenitized or tower is a bit different. There's less landscaping, but it's the same general premise. Has somebody get on the roof and make sure there's nothing up there that can become a missile? Because people, if there's a storm coming, you're working on your cooling tower, guess what? Those guys took off and they left a bunch of stuff lying around, right? So it's incumbent upon the chief engineer to go up there and look, and you as the board members making sure they did that job and everything else in between. So it's really checking. That's kind of pre-storm, but still very important because it's going to solve some of your post-storm issues.
Yeah,
And also, by the way, to piggyback off of that, David, you raised a good point here as a project manager, right? So if you're an association that has nearby construction, a construction site development next door, and you share a roadway or you share some kind of ingress and egress to that site on your site, which a lot of the properties do right now, I can name off the top of my head the top 10 of them. You know, there becomes an issue here, right? Because and David could probably expand on the construction side more, right? They have to have their own hurricane plan. They have to have an evacuation plan. They have to know where all the cranes are going, all the trucks are going, where all the swing stations are going. They have to have a plan for that. If they're in the middle of their plan and your folks are trying to evacuate too, and you didn't find out what their evacuation plan is and didn't plan for that, there's going to be a lot of chaos. And that's something, again, you can prepare. You can go next door, talk to the foreman, talk to him, or get communication, get a dialogue going and say, hey, can you share what your evacuation plan would be? I mean, it's very, very essential. And if you haven't had that experience, meaning you haven't gone over there, you haven't gone through and talked to a foreman or anything like that, right now is a good time to do it. You know, if you're a property manager, and I know I can name
Great point.
8, 10 KW properties that we're representing or we know about that are next door. And again, they share an easement or they share some kind of ingress and egress spot where I guarantee when the chaos happens, that construction site is going to shut down and they're going to leave as fast as possible because they have to, right? And so, you know, if you get in the middle of that and you're unsure and your tenants and your unit owners can't leave, it's going to be a huge problem.
It just comes down to communication, really. It's really looking ahead and thinking the what ifs. And it's a lot for a board to take on. You're busy enough dealing with, you know, your projects and special assessments and issues and that revolve around the building. But this is one of those things that needs to get thought of. And if this is the first time some of these folks are listening to this type of dialogue, it's really just, this is year one, assume. It's going to be the same thing next year and the year after. If you set this up properly and have a program in place for your predecessors or your successors, then everything should be smooth. But it's a matter of taking that first step. And the folks that are here, obviously here for a reason. So hopefully this is helpful.
yeah. If you set up that hurricane plan and you're proactive, the recovery is going to be so much easier. It is going to be so much easier. I mean,
That too. Yeah.
And I find out a lot of these properties that are very reactive instead of proactive. So they're trying to figure out during the storm what kind of communications to send out. Where are the sandbags? Where's the construction? Where do we put away the chairs? Like, you need to be proactive and you need to have a really, really good hurricane plan here before, and it'll be much easier. These two gentlemen right here can come in. You're just going to make it so much easier for them afterward. You know, I'm actually looking at the list here, and I want to thank all of our board members and managers that are here online. Thanks for joining us. It's nice to see everyone here. Umberto had a question here. And I want to, just from your experience, Matt, David, everything always feels urgent after hurricane, right? And I know we discussed it a little bit, but what is the one thing that you think most people want to get done immediately? Like, fix it now. This needs to happen now. I need help with this. What is, from your experience? He wants to know, what is the most you do with the first, 48, 72 hours?
So I'll jump in quick and then I'll throw it to you, David.
Yeah, go
But
ahead.
for us, the first it's a two-step conversation. The first conversation, if there's a lot of roof damage, obviously you got to tarp the roofs, you got to put PLC, you got to figure out a way to you got to mitigate the loss. You got to keep the water out if it's coming through the roof system, right? And so a lot of the times that's the first thing we have to deal with. Windows fail. Sliding glass doors fail. They have production standards and installation standards, but they fail. They're not perfect, right? And so windows and sliding glass doors oftentimes come next. However, if it's almost like if the glass doesn't break, you kind of think, stop thinking about that for the moment. The roof is first, windows are second, sliding glass doors. If the glass isn't broken, then you think about, okay, what else is damaged here? And then that logically, outside of the envelope, you go inside and you say, oh man, we got to rip out all this drywall. But that takes a month, sometimes 6 weeks if it's a big property, to get through all that and dry it all out. And then without fail, the moment that the mitigation company's out of there, I get the question the next day: when can we put the drywall back? When can we put the drywall back? When can we put the drywall back? Obviously, right? Because you can't do anything without the drywall. You can't repaint. You can't feel like you're home. You have tape and plastic everywhere, and it just looks like a construction site, right? Or like a hurricane ran through, right? And so that's the first question. But that's not just hurricanes. That's any loss that involves water and that involves demo. So, to that point, most people may not like this. I'll preface that, but I have to give two answers. I'm a fiduciary. All right. If I'm representing the association, I'm a fiduciary. My fiduciary answer is that you have to wait. You have to wait because I'm trying to prevail and get you every penny that you're owed from your policy that you paid a premium for. Right. Now, with that being said, that doesn't mean that's always reality and that it's always practical. Right. Sometimes you have to do things because claims take 6 to 8 months, and if the claim's in September, we're right around to a hurricane season right after that, right? And November is the latest, but between August and September, you have the highest percentage of opportunity chance, I should say, of a hurricane, not an opportunity. But the biggest thing is, again, you have to wait. You have to wait. You have to wait. I'll always repeat that, but we can go through, and with David's team and them being able to understand the CPM or what the entire loss and damage is, at that point, you probably know, but they can understand the entire picture and say, okay, let's do things in this order. Let's create a plan. Maybe that's the roofs, right? Maybe you got some money for the insurer for the roofs, and you go ahead and do all the roofs. And that way you're watertight as much as possible going into storm season, right? Now that the opportunity cost there would be if the insurance company comes back, says they want to reinspect, which you guys know that happens 7, 8, 9 months, a year in, 2 years in, it doesn't matter. They have the right to inspect. The opportunity cost might be they come back and say, wait a second, you had a tile roof here before, and now you have a metal roof. Well, just understanding construction and material costs and labor costs, that's probably a little bit less expensive. That doesn't mean that the association didn't do the right thing. It doesn't mean it's not their right. It is their right to do whatever they want to repair their buildings. But it creates a situation where the insurer, every time without fail, and I know I'm biased, but every time without fail, they say, oh, give me the invoices. Let me see how much it costs. Because if they paid you 10 million and you spent 8, then I'm biased, so take the other grain of salt when I say this, they're going to take it out of somewhere else. Trust me. And so you want to, again, my fiduciary answer is always to wait, because I'm trying to prevail on the claim 100% for you, right? For the association. But it's not practical. But I would suggest
So you're
that's
saying,
when you
Matt, they
call in
can do
David's team.
so you're saying they can do the metal roof after the fact. They've already gotten the claim dollars. They're not going to come back and try to recover those monies. Once you've got the claim, you can do what you want with it.
Correct. Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
know
look,
that. I'm just saying that to make sure everybody understands.
you just have to make the repair, right? You can't claim it later if you don't make the repair.
Right.
Makes sense?
And I can, it's funny, I'm not going to repeat what Matt said, but yes, it's envelope, then interiors. You got to secure the envelope. That's number one. get the water from coming in the building, now get the water out of the building. And it's somewhat concurrent. You're not going to wait. First thing you're going to do is you're going to get the scrubbers in there. But if it's raining in the building, what's the point? The first thing you got to do is you get a roof back on the building, secure whatever envelope problems you have, rip your drywall out, get your scrubbers in there and start drying out this building as best you can to make it as inhabitable as you can, because we didn't talk about that. Folks are gone sometimes. They want to come back. So there's going to be tests that have to be done to say, look, is the building safe to come back, from an air, perspective? And if it is, then folks are fine, but miserable because it's not the condition they wanted to be in. And that's where it comes down to, okay, have a little bit of patience, because we got to plan the attack here. We can't just, throw a bunch of guys at it and expect it's going to go away. We got to have a good plan in play and know what dollars are coming our way. And like we said, the concurrency of that claim and concurrency of the planning process will kind of happen. And then when we hit the ground running with a claim, or maybe even before, we have folks engaged. We could have it lined up to where the claim hits and we can hit the ground running. And so, but like Matt said, we kind of want to know we have that ready.
Also, I would expand on this a little bit more, David. I mean, your relationships with subs and material providers, vendors, things like that, that's going to be really, really important at the end of the day too. So I always caution. I know everyone wants to do maybe let's just do the drywall. I said, guys, if you do it all at once, you're going to get preferential pricing. It's a much bigger project. The general conditions are going to be a lot less because they're all predicated on the labor, material costs, and all the things that have to happen with there's a process here. So can you do some of the work, 1/10 of the work at a time? Sure, it's going to cost you more money, but okay, if that's what you want to do. But again, there will be an opportunity cost potentially if the insurer wants to reinspect you this. Now, call David and his team. They can probably put a whole, compartmentalize all those things and put a whole process together for it, and you can get through that process as I'm communicating with them and the board. Hey, we just got this check for this. We're going to evaluate the windows and doors now, which always take the longest because they never want to pay for windows and doors. But that's the best way to smooth everything out and to actually save money. You got to do it. You got to do it promptly, but properly.
And it may even shorten that timeline, right? It may shorten
Absolutely.
the window of, right. So that's the goal as well, usually.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. And so, like Matt said, just windows, take sliding glass doors alone. And when you've got the kind of demand that's going to happen, or roofing insulation, whatever it is, I mean, there's always the demand on materials. And if you can start talking to your preferred subcontractors ahead of time and know you have, kind of POs in order, maybe not purchased yet, but know that you're in line and line them up because of relationships, it makes a big difference. And
Yeah,
so,
Gabriella on here had that question. She said, David, how do you make sure you have those resources? Because there's always a shortage of cement, shingles, nails, wood, plywood, 2x4s. How do, in your end, how do you also have to wait, 4 to 6 weeks till the supply chain catches up, or do you have a way of making sure those resources are available?
it always becomes a supply chain situation, because when a storm as big as these storms are hit, the Home Depots and the Lowe's of the world are out of business as well, right? In that local market. So everything's kind of coming in from afar. And so there is a demand. And, part of this, it also begs to, who are you going to choose as your contractor? Because it becomes a buying power. Like, we're not buying the lumber. We're going to depend on the contractor to buy the lumber. So I want to bring the right general contractor or restoration contractor that has the leverage, that's big enough, that has that kind of pull with the concrete companies and with the lumber companies, versus hiring a guy that was the cheapest guy, but he's got no leverage. He's not in town. He doesn't have the relationships. Everything in this world is about relationship driven, because they
100%.
know that when the storm's over, they're buying from them tomorrow. And so people are going to take care of people they know. When Charlie hit, we do big business here with a roofing company, and they don't do business over in Sanibel, but this was an early Sanibel. We had a roofing project over there that tore the roof off. I called these folks, and they were over there the next day and re-roofed the building for me. Why? Because they wanted to take care of me. They know that there's going to, not just me, and say it's in general, if you're dealing with somebody that's reputable, that's been in business, that's going to take care of these folks and look at them long term, that's how things work.
Right.
So it's a good question.
Yeah. Matt, Sandra has a question here. If you have flood barriers for your garage and your property, and you don't put them up and you get flooded, can you explain what?
Look at Matt.
So what's the reason why they weren't put up? Was there an evacuation? You couldn't get to it? You know, there's reasons, right? So,
Right.
I mean, you should again, I hate to harp on this again, but it's the truth, right? There should be a plan in place already. That should be automatic, right? If you have floodgates, they should be automatics. Someone is designated to do that, depending on who's there on shift for that particular day and time, and that needs to happen. Just like uh, getting all the 50-pound loungers off the pool deck. Like everyone has to have an idea of what they need to do in that moment and who's at the property that day to complete that. But if you don't put them up, right, you're kind of liable, right? There's some contributory liability there that is part of it. Just same thing as if you don't put your hurricane shutters up, right? And it's in your policy that you have hurricane shutters and you got a premium credit for it or a discount for it, right? If you don't put them up, okay, well, it's going to go the opposite way when it comes to coverage, right? So, these are things that again need to be in the at KW, part of your SOEs and your hurricane plan here, and that should be automatic. However, there are times when, I've had claims where, a security company vendor was responsible for the floodgates. It was in their contract. They had been trained on it. Everything was there, right? So even when they had new hires come to the building over the time of the contract, the term of the contract, they were taught how to put the floodgates up and told this is your responsibility. Push the elevators to the third or fourth floor, put the floodgates up, do what you got to do. They're all trained on it, right? And so in that instance, to give a different perspective here, that instance, the liability was on the security company because they didn't do it. And so that's a totally different situation. But it goes to the point that if someone knows they're supposed to do it and they've been trained on it and they've practiced and a situation comes and they don't do it, it's really on them. And if that person is a KW employee, it's on KW at that point. If there's a security guard company employee, it's on them at the end of the day, right? And so that's how you have to think about things, unfortunately, because we're in a very litigious society in general. But everyone's going to try and distribute the blame as quickly as possible in situations like that.
This is why I think, to your point, and I'll just put in a management hurricane preparedness plug in here. It's so important that if you have a plan, that you're exercising that plan, that you're training on a continual basis throughout hurricane season. It's critical. It's critical that the board is also understanding what awareness and expectations is being set of the management team on site, whether you have a management company or you're self-managed, that you're having those kinds of communication and training is taking place, and it's verified that it's taking place with your management team. Because again, those types of things can be missed if no one's really exercising that plan, and then a hurricane comes and then those big steps are missed. It's very, very important.
Now, you guys, KW, I know, has a lot of planning, a lot of SOEs, a lot of things that go into all that. But there are several times, and we do these every year. We get calls from different associations that we represent, and their whole team is there, and we give them a quick update on what the season looks like, what we've found from last year. Kind of a hurricane storm or storm season update, preparedness webinar, whatever you want to call it, or seminar, whatever you want to call it. But a lot of times I ask two questions. One, I said, who in here? And it's everybody's whole staff, right? I say, who in here is responsible for taking all of the 50-pound loungers on the pool deck and stacking them and securing them so they don't fly all over the place? Who in here is responsible? When I look around, it's crickets, right? Like nothing. No one puts their hand up, right? I say, okay. So, and then I say, and then let's think about something else that's very important. Who in here has the copy of the certified policy from the insurance company? Crickets, right? So it's not just the actual act of getting the building prepared, right? The certified copy of the policy, I tell everyone, you should put a mark on your calendar. 45 days after renewal, most renewals in the state of Florida conveniently happen before June 1st, most of them, and most associations don't realize that that's on purpose in the insurance industry. It's much harder to bind coverage in November after you've had two hurricanes come through your property in a 4-week time period, right? So, we want to get it done hopefully by June 1st. Put a 45-day note on your calendar that says send email to our agent and our insurer, one each to both people, both entities, and say, please provide us our full certified copy of our policy. It might take 60 days, but after 45, the copy of your policy should be done and it should be digitized. And so, might take up to 60 days, but after 45, should request it and keep that copy. And I know for KW managers, you get points for that. So I always bring that up in some of the discussions that we have. So.
You know, Matt, I had a question for Matt on a roof. You know, you have a roof, let's say, and it's 15 years old, a 20-year lifespan, right? Storm comes through, rips the roof off, you need a new roof. So is it replacement value or is it new roof? Like what happens at that point from a claim perspective? Is it statutory or is it based upon the policy?
Yeah, so typically all risk policies for associations are RCV policies, right? And so in this instance, depending on the language, right, and it's not always the same, but typically it is the same. It's an RCV policy, and if you do the work, if they hold back any recoverable depreciation, you should get that back once the work is done. So to the point I made before, even if you get a roof system that might cost less, but it might help fortify your building, better, right? You still deserve to get back the recoverable depreciation if it costs more than what they held back. If that makes sense. So that's the intricate stuff. That's all about the loss draft process and the work. But again, that goes back to the communication, which is a common theme that we keep talking about here, which is, if they have representation, Global Pro, and they have your team there managing the project, we can talk about that stuff. And I can explain, here's what the policy says, here's what they need to do to unlock the recoverable depreciation, because it's a 15-year roof, and that comes with some type of depreciation always, no matter what. But then there's other things like code and things like that you have to consider and you have to comply with as well. So it's not as easy
would have changed.
as most
Codes
people think.
usually get tougher as we go by. So now you've got to upgrade that roof because you hadn't done so previously.
Yep. And it gets, because of the legislative changes, to your point about statutory requirements, because of the legislative changes over the past 4 years, it's much harder now. It's much harder, and especially on a residential claim, on a homeowner's claim, it's much harder when it comes to the roof, the age of the roof, and things like that. So these are things, again, that have to be discussed and considered. And on a major catastrophic loss after a hurricane for an association, communication is key. It's kind of becoming the central theme here, I think.
Seems it.
Yeah, we have 3 minutes here, gentlemen, left. I have a question here that came from Mary. David, are the pictures, the drone shots, and the walkthrough videos just as important for you as they are for Matt? Do you use those pictures and videos to guide you during a project, or?
It's not as important for us as it is for Matt, but if the building's gone through a state of serious disaster and we want to put back what was there before, it gives us a good idea as to what the replacement needs to be. Sometimes we may not bring in a design professional because we might just putting back together what was there. So it's helpful to see what was in place. So without question, for us, any kind of documentation is key. So whenever we look at any given project, whether it's a commercial ground up or a restoration project, photos are well worth the weight in gold. And yes, it's truly helpful because many times we'll put that as part of the RFP and make sure that the contractor becomes responsible for replacing like for like, let's say, right? So no, they are helpful. It's a good question. It benefits Matt more because he's really going for the dollars, but it helps us. There's no question about it. Yes.
Okay, great. If you guys, we have 2 minutes left here. If you want to share a one best practice, one thing you'd like everybody to do as a closing statement, please go ahead and take the moment now.
Sure. You want to jump first, or? I'm happy to talk. You know me. I'll talk for hours.
1 minute here.
Yeah, look, pre-hurricane annual prep. We talked about it. Now's the time. If you haven't done it, you're 2 weeks in. Drop what you're doing. You still go away for 4th of July. That's fine, but you kind of need to get into your program here and make sure that you've got your house in order, whether you're self-managed or not, just to make sure everybody has their responsibilities. You got your communications in place, and we know who's in charge. Like who's actually calling the shots. You got your board presidents, you got your quorums. Make sure that you all connected and know when decisions have to be made, that they can be made on the fly, because they're going to be quick decisions that have to be made initially.
Great, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. I think my message really is that representation is key, right? A property that has property management, really good property management like KW, a property that suffers a loss that gets representation like Global Pro, or I should say always Global Pro calls first, right? They typically end up prevailing much better, right? And what I give you statistics for that. So we've just come across a bunch of reports that just came out. When you have no representation, as a policyholder, you have a 28% chance of getting $1, just $1, just any type of payment, 28% chance. When you have representation, you have a 70% chance. So it almost doubles, 2.5 times, basically, right? And so that's a significant difference. Now, with that being said, we can also go to project management. If you're making capital improvements, you need a project manager. You need someone to make sure that the project goes, goes correctly. It's under budget or at budget. There's not a lot of change orders. There's all these things that could happen, right? So you
Too
need
many places for gaps.
Yeah.
And
you
goal
need
is to
someone
close.
like David's team, right, to do that. But communication is the theme I got from today's talk, and also that representation really does matter. And as a board, again, your fiduciary duty is the utmost importance. You have to fulfill it. Fiduciary means financial. When it comes to a loss, in my opinion, again, I'll preface that, my opinion, right? The fiduciary, the financial health of your association is the most important thing at that point. And you have to have the right people in place, whether it's mitigation, whether it's your property management company, whether it's Global Pro on the claim side, or whether it's David's team. It's very, very important. So if I can leave with any of that, communicate and get the right team together, and you'll have success.
That's great advice, Matt. Thank you very much.
Matt.
And everyone, I know it's 3:01 now. On behalf of KWPMC, I just want to thank David and Matt for being on. This was an amazing discussion. And I promise you, next time Matt is on, I'll try to get you that video.
There you go.
All right, everyone.
We'll see. You're gonna have to go to Dad because I'm not gonna give it to you. So we'll see.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye
Thanks,
bye.
guys. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.